The Senate hearing room fell silent as Senator Rand Paul gave a sharp grin and remarked, "Perhaps Representative Crockett should consider returning to law school." Crockett didn't react. Instead, she calmly raised her phone, her finger hovering over the screen, an action that would shift the course of the hearing. "Senator Paul," she said steadily, "before we go on, everyone here needs to listen to something." The next 20 seconds would turn into a national political moment. The recording she carried would undermine Paul's credibility, revealing a deeper issue within the political establishment, more than simply defending her legal background. But before we get into that, tap the like button and stay with us. This story earns your full attention. The room's tension grew. Paul remained confident, unaware of what was coming. His staff stood ready, prepared to post his expected takedown. Although he often portrayed himself as an outsider, his upbringing had been privileged. The hearing had originally been routine, reviewing Crockett's co-sponsored education bill, free community college, expanded HBCU funding. Paul strongly opposed it, calling the proposal socialist nonsense. But their conflict went beyond policy. 2 weeks earlier, Crockett had publicly challenged Paul's arguments on student loan forgiveness, calling his position economically weak. Her detailed breakdown of student debt had gone viral, showing how it burdened an entire generation. Paul reacted defensively. On Fox News, he questioned her qualifications on economic topics and implied she was merely a diversity hire. The comments triggered widespread backlash, and his supporters responded by sending Crockett an onslaught of racist and sexist messages online. Crockett expected this confrontation and prepared carefully. The stakes were high, another test of what direction Democratic leadership would take and who would shape it. Cameras rolled. C-SPAN aired the hearing live. Millions were watching. As Crockett held her phone, she thought of every person told they weren't enough, of her parents' sacrifices, of her constituents, and of the recording she knew would matter. The session began at 10:30 a.m. After over an hour of predictable statements, it was Paul's turn. His tone shifted the room. He opened with a personal critique framed as a question. "Representative Crockett," he said, adjusting his glasses, "I'm concerned about your qualifications to discuss constitutional law and economic policy." Crockett stayed calm. "I'm happy to address my qualifications, Senator." Paul smirked. "You attended Rhodes College and the University of Houston Law Center. Not exactly Harvard or Yale, is it?" Gasps filled the gallery. Even some Republicans shifted uncomfortably. "I'm proud of my education, Senator," Crockett replied evenly. "Not everyone benefits from legacy admissions." Paul pressed on. "Maybe you should defer to those with a stronger academic foundation. I attended Duke Medical School myself." "Because you were born into opportunities many don't have," Crockett responded. "Because we actually study these issues properly," Paul shot back. "Not at a state school focused more on critical race theory than real economics." The room reacted immediately. Democrats objected. Chairman Bernie Sanders struck the gavel to restore order. Paul continued, "I find it ironic that someone who couldn't pass the bar exam on the first attempt wants to lecture this committee." This was untrue. Crockett had passed the exam the first time. "That's incorrect, Senator, and you know that," Crockett said firmly. "Is it?" Paul replied, lifting a folder. "I have a report here suggesting otherwise. Perhaps your memory is as weak as your resume." Crockett reached for her briefcase. "Since we're discussing qualifications and memory, there is something everyone here needs to hear." Paul laughed. "Oh, this should be interesting. What did you bring, your community college certificate?" Crockett remained composed. She connected her phone to the room's audio system. "This is a recording from a private fundraiser you hosted 3 weeks ago," she said. "You were unaware you were being recorded. Virginia is a one-party consent state." Paul's smile faded. "This is absurd. You can't just play random audio." "I can," Crockett said, interrupting. "Senate rules allow relevant evidence. And this is directly relevant to your remarks about qualifications." She pressed play. Paul's voice echoed through the room, clear despite the background noise. The recording began with a blunt statement. "The problem with Congress today is that we allow anyone to join." Paul's voice continued. "Look at Jasmine Crockett. A law school in Texas that practically accepts everyone, and she thinks that qualifies her." The audio moved forward. Her father was a truck driver. Her mother cleaned bathrooms. And now she believes she can sit in Congress and tell us how to manage the economy. It's unbelievable. The room grew silent. These diversity hires are weakening Congress, the recording said. They lower the standards. Crockett probably got into law school because of affirmative action. A voice in the background asked, but didn't she graduate magna cum laude? Paul dismissed it. Those schools hand out honors to anyone. Doesn't mean much. But the recording didn't stop there. My medical degree from Duke? My father made a call. I was failing biochemistry. One call from Congressman Ron Paul, a donation, and suddenly I'm passing with excellent marks. Murmurs rose in the audio. That's how things work. It's not about what you know. It's who you know. People like Crockett think their degrees matter. Connections matter more than credentials. Crockett paused the recording. The hearing room erupted. Reporters typed rapidly. C-SPAN cameras zoomed in on Paul, his face shifting from red to pale. There is more, Crockett said steadily. Shall I continue? Paul suddenly stood, knocking over a glass of water. This is illegal. You can't record private conversations. As I mentioned, Senator, Virginia is a one-party consent state, Crockett replied. The person who recorded this was invited. This is a setup. Entrapment. Paul shouted, losing composure. Senator Sanders struck the gavel. Senator Paul, sit down. Representative Crockett, proceed. Crockett nodded and pressed play again. The recording resumed. What about AOC? A voice asked. Paul responded, another diversity hire. Bartender to Congress. It's embarrassing. The room reacted audibly. Paul went on to criticize other members using coded, dismissive language. Then came the most damaging part. You know the real issue? Paul said. We've got all these women thinking they can do work meant for men. Crockett. AOC. Warren. They're emotional. They don't think logically. They operate on feelings instead of reason. Crockett stopped the recording. The room broke into confusion. Several female senators, across parties, stood in outrage. Senator Collins appeared visibly angry. Crockett then produced a stack of documents. I also have, Senator Paul, your verified academic records from Duke Medical School. These were obtained through FOIA, as they are part of the public archive. Paul's face turned pale. Those are private, he said quietly. As a public official, your academic records related to your qualifications fall under FOIA. These documents are quite revealing. She lifted the first page. It confirms you were placed on academic probation during your second year at Duke. You failed biochemistry, anatomy, and pharmacology. She held up another record. This one is a letter from the Duke Medical School Dean to your father, Congressman Ron Paul, dated March 15, 1984. It mentions a substantial donation to the school's new research wing and expresses confidence that Rand's academic issues could be resolved. The room stayed quiet. And this, Crockett continued, raising a third document, is your official transcript showing your grades suddenly rising after that donation. Failing marks turning into straight B's almost instantly. Quite notable. Wouldn't you agree? Paul hesitated. This is improper. You have no right. I can and I did, Senator. The same way you tried with me. My academic record is genuine. I earned every grade, honor, and degree through effort. Can you honestly say the same? The contrast was clear. Crockett advancing through merit despite challenges. Paul benefiting from influence despite advantages. She continued and presented her own transcripts. Since you brought up my background, Senator, here are the facts. I graduated summa cum laude from Rhodes College with a 3.98 GPA. I scored in the 95th percentile on the LSAT. I completed my law degree at the University of Houston Law Center magna cum laude. I passed the bar exam on my first try with one of the highest scores in Texas that year. She looked toward Paul. I did all this while working 2 jobs to afford school. No wealthy parent, no donations. Only discipline, persistence, and ability. The room remained still as Crockett directly challenged Paul's credibility, preparing for the next step. Now, Senator Paul, she said firmly, you question my knowledge of constitutional law. So let's review some basic questions every first-year law student should know. Paul had no good option. Refusing to answer would seem evasive. Answering incorrectly would reinforce her point. First question. What does the Supremacy Clause establish, and where is it located? Paul shifted. Not relevant. You made my education relevant. Please answer. Paul cleared his throat. Federal law overrides state law. Article 4. Incorrect, Crockett replied. Article 6. Clause 2. Next. The 3 requirements to serve as president. Paul's expression tightened. Natural-born citizen, 35 years old, 14 years a resident. Crockett completed the answer. Senator, after more than a decade in Congress, you still struggle with basic constitutional standards. She addressed the room. This is the person who questioned my qualifications. He relied on influence to secure his medical degree, cannot answer elementary constitutional questions, yet feels justified in judging others. Then Crockett introduced her strongest point. One final recording, Senator, from a separate event involving donors and other attendees. Paul stood again. This is unfair. Please sit, Senator Paul, Chairman Sanders said. Representative Crockett has the floor. Crockett played the new recording. Paul spoke about a topic far more serious than academic opinions. The education bill Crockett was promoting. We can't let it pass, he said. Why? Educated low-income individuals are a problem. They challenge the system, expect more, and become engaged. It's better to keep them struggling with debt, working long hours, and too busy to organize or vote. Someone questioned him. Isn't that pessimistic? It's practical, Paul answered. I'll oppose the bill publicly on budget grounds, but we must preserve the divide. If everyone becomes educated, who handles basic labor? Who accepts minimum wage? The system operates because many people lack alternatives. The recording continued, with Paul describing intentional efforts to keep education costly and out of reach. He acknowledged affordability issues but coordinated with think tanks to produce reports claiming otherwise. We spent $700 billion on defense last year. We could easily fund free community college, but we won't because an informed population is harder to control. Then the most revealing part. I have arrangements with several for-profit colleges. They fund my campaigns. I protect their business interests. Diploma mills, yes, but they serve a role. They burden people with debt for degrees of little value. Debt keeps people dependent. Dependent people don't challenge the system. Crockett stopped the audio. The room immediately reacted. Senators demanded an ethics review. Reporters hurried out. C-SPAN captured Paul slumped, his position collapsing. Crockett delivered her closing statement. Senator Paul, you mocked my education, criticized my background, and questioned my ability. Yet my so-called inferior education taught me something your paid-for degree did not. Always come prepared, have evidence, and never underestimate someone simply because they lack privilege. As Crockett returned to her seat, the gallery erupted in applause. Paul tried to regain control. This is character assassination. I'll sue. Sue? Crockett asked calmly, turning back. Sue me for presenting the truth, using your own words, and showing your documents? Please, go ahead. Discovery would be very revealing. The implication hit Paul immediately. Discovery meant more public records. His life would be under scrutiny. Chairman Sanders, with barely concealed satisfaction, called the recess. This hearing will resume after lunch. Senator Paul, please consult your attorney. Senators filed out. Paul remained, flanked by panicking staff. His chief of staff was on the phone. The press secretary drafted statements. But it was too late. Clips had gone viral. Hashtag Rand Paul exposed trended worldwide. News networks interrupted programming. Senator Rand Paul caught on tape making racist and sexist remarks. Crockett, meanwhile, was surrounded by colleagues. Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez hugged her. Incredible. You defended all of us. Senator Elizabeth Warren approached. Brilliant takedown. You should testify before the Ethics Committee. Absolutely, Crockett replied. Reporters swarmed. How long did you plan this? One shouted. I don't plan confrontations, she replied calmly. I just come prepared. The decision for Kentucky rests with its voters. I've simply provided the information. Elsewhere in the capital, Paul faced political ruin. Donors withdrew support. The Kentucky Republican Party called an emergency meeting. Rumors circulated that Senate GOP leadership wanted him removed from committees. His wife was furious. The aftermath was a political earthquake. News cycles dominated. Social media blazed. Corporate donors pulled funding. Duke Medical School announced a review of 1980s records. The Senate Ethics Committee launched a formal investigation, citing serious concerns about Paul's fitness and possible corruption. The implications extended beyond Paul, sparking national debates about privilege and meritocracy. CNN's Van Jones commented that Crockett had pulled back the curtain on the system. Fox News struggled to defend the recording's content. Ben Shapiro tweeted, "If authentic, Paul faces serious questions." The recording's discussion about restricting education resonated widely, confirming public suspicions about education funding. Teachers' unions released statements. 3 days later, whistleblowers came forward. A former Paul staffer shared emails coordinating with predatory for-profit colleges. The Republican-controlled Kentucky legislature addressed the matter. The Democratic governor publicly called for Paul's resignation. Even his Republican colleagues began distancing themselves. A week later, a visibly strained Paul held a press conference. "Some comments were taken out of context," he began. A reporter interrupted, "Senator, you said poor people should be kept uneducated. What context makes that acceptable?" "I was speaking theoretically," he stammered. "You said you bought your medical degree," the reporter continued. "Mischaracterization." The press conference dissolved within 5 minutes. Jasmine Crockett emerged as a national figure. Her social media following skyrocketed. Time magazine prepared a cover story. She remained focused on her education bill. "We face those who want to keep us down," she said at a rally. "We won't let them." The stalled bill gained momentum. 2 weeks later, Duke Medical School alumni filed a lawsuit claiming their degrees had been devalued. Investigations expanded. Journalists discovered other politicians who had obtained degrees following significant family donations. Polls in Kentucky showed Paul's approval rating at 18%. Primary challengers emerged, and the state party considered asking him not to seek re-election. 3 weeks after the hearing, the Department of Justice launched a corruption investigation into Paul related to for-profit colleges. The FBI raided his offices. Duke Medical School announced they were revoking Rand Paul's medical degree. Evidence clearly indicated that Paul had obtained the degree through fraudulent means. Their statement described the situation as unprecedented. A month later, Rand Paul announced he would not seek re-election, citing cancel culture but denying wrongdoing. His statement backfired, with critics highlighting his attack on Crockett. In Congress, that day is still discussed. Young staffers watch it for guidance. New members study Crockett's approach. The lesson is clear. Come prepared, have evidence, and never let anyone make you feel inferior. It's not where you start. It's how hard you fight. Jasmine Crockett demonstrated that those who fight hardest often fight best. What are your thoughts on this situation? Share your opinion in the comments below. If this story moved you, subscribe to Celebrity Stories. We explore the complexities others avoid, and we're just getting started. God bless you, and God bless America. The Senate hearing room went silent as Senator Rand Paul grinned sharply. Perhaps Representative Crockett should just go back to law school. Crockett did not flinch. She pulled out her phone, her finger hovering over the recording that would change everything. "Senator Paul," she said steadily, "before we continue, everyone in this room needs to hear this." The next 20 seconds would become a viral political moment. The recording would expose Paul's credibility issues, revealing a scandal deep within the establishment and defending her education. She added, "But before we dive in, hit that like button and stay with us. This story is worth every second." Tension filled the room. Paul's smug smile remained, unaware. His staff prepared to tweet his takedown. Despite claiming to be a maverick, he grew up privileged. The day's hearing was meant to be routine, reviewing Crockett's co-sponsored education funding bill, including free community college and increased HBCU funding. Paul opposed the measures, dismissing them as socialist nonsense. But deeper tension existed. 2 weeks prior, Crockett had publicly criticized Paul's stance on student loan forgiveness, calling his arguments economically illiterate. Her viral presentation had highlighted how student debt crushed a generation. Paul had taken the criticism poorly. On Fox News, he questioned Crockett's qualifications for complex economic issues, making snide remarks about her being a diversity hire. Outrage followed, and Paul doubled down, as his supporters flooded Crockett's social media with racist and sexist attacks. Crockett anticipated this face-to-face hearing and came fully prepared. The stakes were high, a battle over democracy and who holds power. Cameras rolled. C-SPAN broadcast live. Millions would witness what unfolded. Holding her phone, Crockett thought of those told they weren't good enough, her parents' sacrifices, and her constituents' faith in the recording that would change everything. The hearing began at 10:30 a.m. After an hour of predictable opening statements, Rand Paul's turn to question Crockett shifted the atmosphere. He launched a personal attack disguised as a senatorial inquiry. "Representative Crockett," he said, adjusting his glasses, "I'm concerned about your qualifications to speak on constitutional law and economic policy." Crockett remained composed. "I'm happy to discuss my qualifications, Senator." Paul smirked. "You went to Rhodes College and the University of Houston for law school. Not exactly Harvard or Yale, is it?" Gasps filled the gallery. Even some Republican colleagues shifted uncomfortably. "I'm proud of my education, Senator," Crockett replied calmly. "Not everyone has the privilege of legacy admissions." Paul pressed. "Perhaps you should defer to those with more substantial educational backgrounds. I went to Duke for medical school." "Because you were born into them," Crockett shot back. "Because we studied them properly," Paul countered. "Not at some state school where they probably spent more time on critical race theory than actual economics." The room erupted. Democrats objected. Chairman Bernie Sanders banged his gavel. Paul continued, "I find it amusing that someone who couldn't even pass the bar exam on her first try wants to lecture us." "That's false, Senator, and you know it," Crockett said firmly. "She had passed on her first attempt." "Is it?" Paul asked, pulling out a folder. "I have here a report that suggests otherwise." "Maybe your memory is as questionable as your qualifications," Crockett replied, reaching for her briefcase. "Since we're discussing qualifications and memory, I have something everyone here needs to hear." Paul laughed. "Ooh, this should be good." "What? Did you bring your community college diploma?" Crockett remained composed. She pulled out her phone and connected it to the audio system. "This is a recording from a private fundraiser you held 3 weeks ago, Senator. You didn't know you were being recorded, but Virginia is a one-party consent state." Paul's smirk faltered. "This is ridiculous. You can't just play random recordings." "Oh, but I can," Crockett interrupted. "Senate rules allow relevant evidence. This is very relevant to your comments about qualifications." She pressed play. Paul's voice filled the room clearly despite background noise. "The problem with Congress today is we're letting anyone in. Look at this Jasmine Crockett. Some nobody from a Texas law school that accepts basically anyone." The recording continued. Her father was a truck driver. Her mother cleaned toilets. And now she thinks she can sit in Congress and tell us how to run the economy. It's laughable. These diversity hires are destroying Congress. They lower the bar. Crockett probably got into law school because of affirmative action. A voice asked, "But didn't she graduate magna cum laude?" Paul dismissed it. "Those schools give out honors like candy. Doesn't mean anything. My medical degree from Duke. My dad made a call. I was failing biochemistry. One phone call from Congressman Ron Paul, a donation, and suddenly I'm passing with flying colors." Murmurs rose in the room. That's how the real world works. Not what you know, who you know. People like Crockett think their little degrees mean something. Connections matter more than credentials. Crockett paused the recording. The hearing room erupted. Reporters typed furiously. C-SPAN zoomed in on Paul's face, red to white. "There is more," Crockett said calmly. "Should I continue?" Paul abruptly stood, knocking over his water glass. "This is illegal. You can't record private conversations." "As I said, Senator, Virginia is a one-party consent state. The person who recorded this was invited," Crockett replied. "This is a setup. Entrapment," Paul shouted, losing composure. Chairman Sanders banged his gavel. Senator Paul, please sit down. Representative Crockett, please continue. Crockett nodded and pressed play. The recording resumed. What about that AOC? Another diversity hire, Paul said. Bartender to Congress. It's embarrassing, he continued, discussing other members derogatorily with coded language. Then came the most damaging part. You know the real problem? We've got all these women thinking they can do a man's job. Crockett, AOC, Warren, they're emotional. They don't understand logic. They think with feelings instead of brains. Crockett stopped the recording. The room was in upheaval. Several female senators, bipartisan, stood in protest. Senator Collins looked furious. Crockett produced documents. I also have Senator Paul documentation of your actual academic record from Duke Medical School. Public records obtained through FOIA. Paul's face paled. Those are private. As a public official, your educational records relating to qualifications are subject to FOIA. These records are very revealing. She held up the first document. You were on academic probation your second year at Duke. You failed biochemistry, anatomy, and pharmacology. Another document followed, a letter from the Duke Medical School dean to Paul's father, Congressman Ron Paul, dated March 15, 1984. It referenced a generous donation to the school's new research wing and expressed confidence that Rand's academic issues could be resolved. The room was silent. And this, Crockett continued, holding a third document, is your actual transcript showing grades mysteriously improved after that donation, failing to straight A's overnight. Remarkable, wouldn't you say? Paul stammered. This is a violation. You can't. I can and I did, Senator, just like you tried to do to me. My academic record is real. I earned every grade, honor, and degree through hard work. Can you say the same? The comparison was stark. Crockett had overcome obstacles by merit. Paul had leveraged privilege to succeed. Crockett wasn't finished. She pulled out her own transcripts. Since you brought up my education, Senator, let's go over the facts. I graduated summa cum laude from Rhodes College with a 3.98 GPA, scored in the 95th percentile on the LSAT, graduated magna cum laude from the University of Houston Law Center, and passed the bar on my first attempt with one of the highest scores in Texas that year. She looked directly at Paul. I achieved this while working 2 jobs to pay for my education. No wealthy father, no donations, just hard work, determination, and intelligence. The room fell silent as Crockett methodically dismantled Paul's credibility, building towards something greater. Now, Senator Paul, she said with authority, you questioned my qualifications on constitutional law. Let's go over some basic questions any first-year law student should know. Paul was trapped, refused to answer and appear cowardly, or respond and prove her point. First question, Crockett continued. What does the Supremacy Clause establish, and where is it found? Paul shifted in his seat. Not relevant. You made my education relevant. Answer, Crockett pressed. Paul cleared his throat. Federal law supersedes state law. Article 4. Wrong, Crockett corrected. Article 6. Clause 2. Next. 3 requirements to be president. Paul hesitated. Crockett finished for him. Natural-born citizen, at least 35 years old, 14 years a resident of the United States. She addressed the room. Senator, after over a decade in Congress, you can't answer basic constitutional questions. And yet you question my qualifications. He bought his medical degree and can't answer fundamental questions, yet has the audacity to judge others. Then came Crockett's masterstroke. One more recording from a different event, Senator. A private meeting with donors and other individuals. Paul stood. Enough. Witch hunt. Sit down. Chairman Sanders intervened. Senator Paul, please sit down. Representative Crockett has the floor. Crockett pressed play. This recording revealed far more than opinions about education. Paul discussed the bill Crockett was pushing. We can't let this pass, Paul said. Why? Educated poor people are dangerous. They ask questions, demand things. Better to keep them struggling with debt, working 3 jobs, no time to organize or vote. Someone interjected, isn't that cynical? Paul replied, it's realistic. I'll vote against it publicly, citing fiscal responsibility, but we need to maintain the gap. If everyone gets educated, who does menial jobs? Who accepts minimum wage? The system works because most people don't have options. The recording continued. Paul outlined a deliberate strategy to make education expensive and inaccessible, coordinating with think tanks to publish studies claiming otherwise. We spent $700 billion on defense last year. Could fund free community college with a fraction, but we won't. An educated populace is harder to control. The most damaging revelation. I've got arrangements with several for-profit colleges. They donate to my campaigns. I protect their interests. Diploma mills, yes, but they serve a purpose. Saddle people with debt for worthless degrees. It keeps them desperate. Desperate people don't rock the boat. Crockett stopped the recording. Chaos erupted. Senators demanded an immediate ethics investigation. Reporters scrambled. C-SPAN cameras captured Paul slumping in his seat, his credibility collapsing. Crockett delivered one final blow. Senator Paul, you mocked my education, questioned my intelligence, and derided my background. But my so-called inferior education taught me what your purchased degree apparently did not. Always come prepared, always have evidence, and never underestimate someone who doesn't come from privilege. As she returned to her seat, the gallery erupted. Paul made a desperate attempt. This is character assassination. I'll sue. Sue? Crockett asked, turning back. Sue me for telling the truth, playing your words, showing your documents? Please proceed. Discovery would be very interesting. The implications hit Paul. Discovery meant more public records, his life scrutinized. Chairman Sanders, with barely concealed satisfaction, announced, recess. This hearing reconvenes after lunch. Senator Paul, consult your attorney. As senators filed out, Paul remained, his staff in a panic. His chief of staff called frantically, and his press secretary drafted statements, but it was too late. Clips went viral. Rand Paul exposed, trended globally. News networks broke into programming. Senator Rand Paul caught on recording making racist and sexist remarks. Meanwhile, Crockett was surrounded by colleagues, receiving congratulations. Representative Ocasio-Cortez hugged her. Incredible. You defended all of us. Senator Warren approached. Brilliant takedown. You should testify before the Ethics Committee. Absolutely, Crockett replied. Reporters swarmed. How long were you planning this? One shouted. I don't plan confrontations, she calmly replied. I just come prepared. The rest is up to the facts. For Kentucky to decide. I've simply provided information. Elsewhere in the Capitol, Paul faced political ruin. Donors withdrew support. The Kentucky Republican Party scheduled an emergency meeting. Rumors circulated that Senate GOP leadership wanted him off committees. Even his wife was furious. The hearing's aftermath was a political earthquake. News cycles dominated. Social media blazed. Paul's corporate donors pulled back. Duke Medical School announced a review of 1980s records. The Senate Ethics Committee launched a formal investigation, citing serious questions about his fitness and possible corruption. The implications extended beyond Paul, sparking conversations about privilege and meritocracy. CNN's Van Jones remarked Crockett pulled back the curtain on the system. Fox News struggled to defend the recording. Ben Shapiro tweeted, if authentic, Paul has serious questions. The recording about keeping people uneducated resonated widely, confirming suspicions about education funding. Teacher unions released statements. 3 days later, whistleblowers emerged. A former Paul staffer released emails coordinating with predatory for-profit colleges. The Kentucky legislature, controlled by Republicans, addressed the issue. The Democratic governor called for Paul's resignation. Even Republican colleagues distanced themselves. A week later, a humbled Rand Paul held a press conference. Some comments were taken out of context, he began. A reporter interrupted. Senator, you said poor people should be kept uneducated. What context makes that acceptable? I was speaking theoretically, he stammered. You said you bought your medical degree. Mischaracterization. We all heard the recording, Senator. The press conference dissolved in 5 minutes. Jasmine Crockett became a national figure. Her social media following soared. Time magazine prepared a cover story. She remained focused on her education bill. Rand Paul admitted what we're up against, she said at a rally. They want to keep us down. We won't let them. The stalled bill gained momentum. 2 weeks later, Duke Medical School alumni sued, claiming devalued degrees. Investigations widened. Journalists discovered other politicians who obtained degrees after significant family donations. Polls showed Paul's approval rating in Kentucky at 18%. Primary challengers emerged. The state party considered asking him not to seek re-election. 3 weeks after the hearing, the Department of Justice investigated Paul for corruption linked to for-profit colleges. The FBI raided his offices. Duke Medical School announced it would revoke Rand Paul's medical degree. Evidence clearly shows Mr. Paul's degree was obtained through fraudulent means. Representative Ocasio-Cortez embraced her. Incredible. You defended all of us. Senator Warren approached. Brilliant takedown. You should testify before the Ethics Committee. Absolutely, Crockett replied. Reporters swarmed around her. How long were you planning this? One shouted. I don't plan confrontations, she calmly said. I just come prepared. Calls for his resignation? That's up to Kentucky. I've simply provided the information. Elsewhere in the Capitol, Rand Paul faced political ruin. Donors withdrew support. The Kentucky Republican Party scheduled an emergency meeting. Rumors spread that Senate GOP leadership wanted him removed from committees. Even his wife was furious. The aftermath of the hearing was a political earthquake. News cycles dominated. Social media exploded. Corporate donors pulled back. Duke Medical School announced a review of its 1980s records. The Senate Ethics Committee launched a formal investigation into Paul, with Chair Chris citing serious concerns about his fitness and possible corruption. The implications extended beyond Paul, sparking national debates about privilege and meritocracy. CNN's Van Jones noted that Crockett had pulled back the curtain on the system. Fox News struggled to defend the recording. Ben Shapiro tweeted, if authentic, Paul has serious questions. The recording revealing attempts to keep people uneducated resonated widely, confirming suspicions about education funding. Teacher unions issued statements. 3 days later, whistleblowers came forward. A former Paul staffer released emails showing coordination with predatory for-profit colleges. The Republican-controlled Kentucky legislature addressed the matter. The Democratic governor called for Paul's resignation. Even his Republican colleagues distanced themselves. A week later, a fatigued Rand Paul held a press conference. Some comments were taken out of context, he began. A reporter interrupted. Senator, you said poor people should be kept uneducated. What context makes that acceptable? I was speaking theoretically, he stammered. You said you bought your medical degree. Mischaracterization. We all heard the recording, Senator, the reporter replied. The press conference ended in 5 minutes. Jasmine Crockett became a national figure. Her social media following skyrocketed. Time magazine prepared a cover story. She stayed focused on her education bill. Rand Paul admitted what we're up against, she said at a rally. They want to keep us down. We won't let them. The stalled bill gained momentum. 2 weeks later, Duke Medical School alumni sued, claiming their degrees were devalued. Investigations widened. Journalists uncovered other politicians who had obtained degrees after substantial family donations. Polls showed Paul's approval rating in Kentucky at 18%. Primary challengers emerged. The state party considered asking him not to seek re-election. 3 weeks after the hearing, the Department of Justice launched an investigation into Paul for corruption linked to for-profit colleges. The FBI raided his offices. Duke Medical School announced it would revoke Rand Paul's medical degree. Evidence clearly shows Mr. Paul's degree was obtained through fraudulent means, their statement read. This was unprecedented. A month later, Rand Paul announced he would not seek re-election, blaming cancel culture while denying any wrongdoing. His statement backfired, critics highlighting his attacks on Crockett. In Congress, that day is still discussed. Young staffers study it for inspiration. New members analyze Crockett's strategy. The lesson is clear. Come prepared, have evidence, and never let anyone make you feel inferior. It's not where you start. It's how hard you fight. Jasmine Crockett showed the world that those who fight hardest often fight the best. What do you think about this situation? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story moved you, subscribe to Celebrity Stories. We explore the complexities others try to hide. And this is just the beginning. God bless you, and God bless America.